Hello everyone, how are you going? And welcome back to some more Historica Canada videos, the same people that produced the Heritage Minute series, and so these are always just fantastic little snippets of history.
1850. Hundreds of lives were lost
Hard starboard!
when the Arctic sank. Mostly women and children.
Really?
Lost, like countless others, to the dense fog so common off the Atlantic coast. A lighthouse lantern cannot cut through heavy fog to warn ships of danger.
Crazy.
If they cannot see a warning, what about sounding a warning? I started working on the idea. Bells and whistles were used in the past, even cannon blasts, but the sound just wouldn't carry. It was simple physics. The lower the frequency of a note, the farther it can be heard.
Right.
The world's first steam foghorn was installed on Partridge Island. Robert Fowles never patented nor profited from his innovation, but for over a century, fog-bound mariners listened for the welcome sound of his life-saving idea.
That is certainly a life-saving idea, for goodness sake. Even the fact that he didn't profit from it, he knew how incredible and how necessary this kind of thing was, and he just went, no, I'm just going to leave it to save lives. And I guess I've never really given the foghorn much thought, but the fact that it is steam-driven is certainly interesting, but I'm a little bit confused because is there foghorns on the land instead of a lighthouse? That's what it seems, but then that doesn't exactly stop ships colliding, unless everyone's got one. Which I guess, to be fair, certainly wouldn't be the hardest thing, especially not with these ones already being steamboats. Steam paddle boats is what I'm assuming. But regardless, the fact that this entire solution emerged from just one guy going, hang on a second, we've obviously used sound in the past and sound does travel, but then we're going, oh, also certain sounds do also travel further than others based on the medium, and so when you do have this nice low foghorn note, then it just goes through everything else. I would love to know how low, as I feel as though I haven't heard a foghorn in a very long time, if ever. Oh, where is it? Wow, that's a horn. Ah, yes. Of course. Yeah. Interesting. So that is the low penetrating note through the fog, and I wonder what kind of experimentation he did. Could he have got the note lower than that and it would have traveled even further, or did he settle on this frequency for a reason, just because it is perfect? Either way, you have to give credit where credit is due, especially because he didn't make any money from it particularly, but in 1860, if you want to call it that, to be building and just saving hundreds of lives every year, pretty incredible. But anyway, now moving on to Dr. Maud Abbott, the Canadian woman who paved the way for modern heart surgery.
I wanted to do something great with my life, to make a difference. I applied to the Faculty of Medicine at McGill.
Dear Miss Abbott, I am sorry to inform you that the Faculty of Medicine can hold out no hope of being
McGill wouldn't take me because I'm a woman, but that was not an issue for Bishop's University. I eventually opened a clinic for women and children in Montreal, often treating infants born with heart defects. Later, I was appointed curator at the McGill Medical Museum. Studying the human heart, its strengths, its frailties, became my life's work. Decades of research, thousands of specimens, it all came together in my atlas of the human heart.
Wow.
Dr. Maud Abbott's work revolutionized the way doctors around the world diagnose heart defects and develop new ways to treat them. The Atlas of Congenital Cardiac Disease proved to be a life-saving Canadian innovation.
Honestly, any of these kind of resources takes so much time and effort, and like she said, thousands of samples and experimentation, but for goodness sake, the amount of lives that can then be saved or at least changed in a major way. Someone just goes from virtually having no capacity to all of a sudden their heart being working enough for them to even live their life. And to think that she was originally denied the ability to be able to do that, you know, this woman that devoted her entire life's work just to studying other people's hearts and just making their lives better was barely even given a life to start off with in the first place. And so I'm sure that it's virtually an impossible metric to know, but to figure out how many lives she truly has saved through her work would be amazing. I mean, even the fact that her book and her entire work is called an atlas, it's not called just a novel or a book or even research, it's just called an atlas, all encompassing. Which, to be honest, the fact that it is still able to get used 100 years later, you know, with all the modern technology and modern science and time and resources that all these incredible people put in the present day, the fact is of the matter that it is still being used 100 years later, even 150 from when she originally started it, and so that really does show you how far in advance she was. But anyway, now moving on to our third one, we have the asbestos strike.
I had been in asbestos for more than 2 months covering the strike for Le Devoir. I spoke to the miners and labor leaders about what they wanted. A 15-cent an hour raise, a pension, and some sort of company action around the toxic dust that was making so many of them sick, their families too. The Quebec government declared the strike illegal. It was clear, to Premier Duplessis there was simply no place for the working class. Cette compagnie ne vise dans la grève actuelle qu'un but, détruire l'organisation syndicale parmi ses employés. Violence came from both sides. At 8 a.m. that morning, I saw 30 armed policemen approach the strikers. And as things seemed ready to boil over, the women of asbestos stepped in and everything stopped for a moment. When the strike finally ended that July, the material gains for the strikers were very little. Many were never rehired. Those who were continued to work in hazardous conditions that would take many lives. The asbestos strike marked the beginning of a new era in the relations between the Quebec press and the labor movement. Polite indifference was no longer possible. For those of us in the press who did care, it was time to get down to serious work.
It doesn't sit right, does it? All of these companies that knew exactly what they were doing, but just didn't care whatsoever about the workers. Even the fact that these guys weren't even trying to get, respirators or anything like that. They just wanted an allowance and a little bit of a pension to cover the hazardous work that they were doing. And they knew that it was hazardous and they still had, no other options really. When is it? 1950, basically. However, one thing that did initially catch me off guard is when he said the women of asbestos stepped in, and that just didn't sound right because I've only ever known asbestos as being a thing, not a place. But as I said at the start here, it is Asbestos Quebec, and so I'm wondering where it is. Look, I just searched up Asbestos Canada, and this is the only place that came up, and Quebec is just there, so I can't imagine it. But are there any mines or visible areas still around? Yes. Whoa. Maybe cover it up. I know asbestos is meant to be like, oh, don't touch it and you should be fine, but I don't know, maybe just try and cover it up a little bit more than that. That's insane. The fact that people live right there, and that is, I can only imagine, a massive asbestos mine. Just the detail of it, and you can really see how much material was removed. All these guys just going at it day after day after day after day, and breath after breath, just slowly just ruining their lungs. And look, the asbestos itself is only half of the entire story that's being covered here. The fact that you just had these journalists then all of a sudden going, hang on a second, we can't be siding with the wrong side here. We need to be reporting the facts. We need to be just representing the people, because otherwise these people are already getting downtrodden by all the higher ups, and then they've got no hope if we don't support them and just get their message out. I can only imagine there would have been quite a few hurdles that these guys were jumping through in order to be able to publish such a thing. For goodness sake, you were going against the government as a journalist. That just sounds very, very dangerous. There are plenty of countries still that you don't particularly want to be doing that. But look, if there is a singular theme that is being carried through all of the videos we are seeing today, it is the fact that if someone truly believes in what they're doing, nothing stops them. But anyway, now moving on to our fourth one, we have Converto Braille, the innovation that opened up a new world for the visually impaired. What's that?
I was born with only 2% of my vision.
2%? How do you measure that?
And I can tell you that the blind have to be 10 times as good as the sighted to get the same job. But too much of the world is beyond reach. If Braille were easier to produce, more material would connect us to a world designed for those with sight. I'm not an engineer, but I envisioned a machine. One that anyone could use to type text that would automatically translate into Braille. My friend Adrien was my eyes and my hands. It took endless trial and error. More than 10,000 hours of painstaking work to build the Converto Braille. Not long after, we set about publishing the latest textbooks, even the daily newspaper. It was all unlocked by a single device.
Roland Galarneau's machine was the first of its kind, a computerized printer capable of translating text into Braille at 100 words per minute. This Canadian innovation opened up a new world for the visually impaired.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I just want to know, when was this? Did it say anywhere? In the late 1960s. Wow, that is pretty darn impressive considering, exactly as it says, the computerized printer capable of transcribing text into Braille at 100 words per minute in the late 1960s. You still have, and I guess they do kind of show it, but you still have computers as big as rooms almost. Perhaps not as big as they were originally, but if that is the machine that we're talking about, even though they did show more of a typewriter one before, sure if that is it, then that is still no small feat. I mean, like I said, it does make me wonder what this machine is, because it almost looks like a typewriter that is just in the language of Braille, which I don't actually know what is the kind of phonetics and how is the makeup of the language of Braille broken up, because that just looks like dual dots they've done every single time. There we go. This is exactly what I wanted, because now I can understand what the kind of alphabet is made up of in terms of, you got what, single dots, doubles, triples. Oh, there is a bit of a gap there, so there are a few different combinations that you have to factor in, but I can understand how once it is computerized, then you really can just churn through it. However, in saying that, I think it is kind of disappointing that I've never been shown this or taught this or anything of that regard. I've never even seen this before. It's just an entirely different language that doesn't exist in so many people's minds, and I guess that is exactly what he is talking about in terms of you have to be 10 times more skilled, or really the world just is not built for the visually impaired. However, even though it may sound a bit cup half empty, I feel as though if this was taught from an early age in school, you could alleviate a lot of problems later down the line, as it's not as though everyone is either born visually impaired or you just completely avoid it. No, people can still become visually impaired when they are teenagers, or even just obviously as you get older, you generally have eyesight problems overall, let alone all of the people that become visually impaired because of a work accident or a sporting accident or a car crash or anything like that. You know, if this is already a language that people can speak, it would just change how the entire world looks at being visually impaired, because there'd be so much more just available for the visually impaired as well. And so I guess overall that just comes back to the message of this video, and also honestly all the videos that we have seen today. If you can help someone out, just do it. But anyway, in saying that, I reckon I'm just going to call it there. So thank you for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, feel free to do the YouTube algorithmic things down below. Also, if this is the first video of mine that you are watching, then maybe you wanted to go check out my other videos. Also, make sure to go check out the awesome videos down in the description below. Or hey, maybe you even just want to consider subscribing so that you don't miss another one of these in the future. But all in all, have a good one and see ya.